I'm Ivan Kaisan. I hail from Honolulu, Hawaii, so not at all involved in that particular fight, except I'll bring out later how we're actually quite similar. We'll be starting our discussion on the film The Greater Idaho Movement, Why Some Want to Leave Oregon. And I have with me the fellow film club moderators, Donna Murphy, Ron McFarlane, and Molly Zeff. In our discussion of the film, and I hope everybody's already seen the film, we'll be following the Braver Angels ground rules, which are we're here to understand others and not to convince anyone to change their mind. We will take turns and not interrupt anyone. Um, we will open space for people who are quieter than others, and we will be respectful. In others, we try to bring our best selves to this conversation. We will welcome your participation, but due to time limitations, be advised that we may not get to everyone. We want people who haven't spoken already to get a chance over someone who already has. We ask that you keep your responses brief, and we may move on to the next question in the interest of time. Okay. Uh, Please mute your microphone now until you're called to speak. And when you are called, then you can please unmute yourself. With that, I'll go to the first question, which comes from Ron.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a joyful evening or had a great day. And I'll start off with the question, pretty basic. What did you think of the film? Just, yeah, what did you think of the film? So, and, you can just raise your hand. Oh, Elizabeth. Go ahead, Elizabeth, unmute yourself. Then we'll go with Jet.
Hi, Ron.
Yeah.
I thought the film identified the problem from Eastern Oregon's point of view. There were no blue voices from the urban area represented in there. And so it was a little bit biased and a little bit surface. It didn't delve too deeply into possible solutions, but it was a good start.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now we're going my favorite, Jack. How you doing, Jack?
Yeah, thank you. I have two comments or thoughts on the film. First, I like the film a lot. And as I finished watching the film, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, is this what the United States going to turn out to be? The Eastern Oregon conservative, Western Oregon liberal. So they, instead of trying to get along, compromise, they decided to split. And I'm saying to myself, is this what United States of America is finally leading to? Splitting between conservatives and liberals, like West and East against the Southern states. Sort of that ran through my mind. That's number one. Number two, when I was hearing about the Boise section of Idaho being more liberal, whereas the other rural section being state conservative, I was thinking maybe they need to get together. The other than the Boise section of Idaho and the Eastern Oregon should just secede from the state and form their own state, make the 51st state. So those are two things that went through my mind when I finished watching the film. So that's my input.
A great observation. I had some of the same questions myself. Thank you. We'll go with, unmute yourself. We'll go with Samantha.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the film. I thought that that the issues were covered well, and it seems to me that in Oregon, it really had to do more with a rural life as opposed to an urban life, not necessarily conservative liberal differences. And we heard from people who lived there that not everyone there wants to split off, and they had good reasons. One of them was the pub owner that was saying, you know, business practices in Idaho come under different rules and regulations, and that it would not work for her. So I thought it was good that we heard from people there who did not want to split off and had good reasons. Anyway, I thought it was excellent. I don't have any problem with not in that particular film, not hearing from people from Portland or from an urban area, because I don't think that was the purpose of it. I think it was really to hear what people in Eastern Oregon were feeling and why this was an issue at all. And that was, I think that was the real purpose of doing the documentary, because the bottom line was they don't feel heard.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Semester. Good observation. Great observation. How about we go with Barb and Gary, or Gary and Barb?
Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Barb.
How you doing there?
I thought it was definitely a film that was trying to capture the voices of people who feel they're aggrieved, that they haven't been heard, and it did a good job of that. I did feel myself wanting to move a little bit toward possible solutions, rather than just the idea, well, we just don't agree, we don't understand each other, we're not listening to each other, so we have to secede, we have to separate. I had wished that there could have been some interviews with maybe elected officials from both urban and rural, to have people become acquainted at the legislative level with what these voices are, you know, trying to say. And I also would have loved one part, maybe at the end, to ask some urban representatives how they find in their life that they're dependent on the eastern part of our state, and how those in the east are dependent on those in the west, whether it's our resources or our tax base or other things that need to explore some mutual interdependence.
All right, great observation. Did you want to add anything on that, Gary?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I just ditto to Barb. I'm part of a team here in Oregon, including Elizabeth, who spoke just a moment ago, that's trying to put together a rural urban workshop program. So we are really eager to get input from everybody here on the national level. But all of those points are important, and I think it sort of challenges braver angels in some respects to figure out how to deal with this issue of feeling disenfranchised. Because that's not really a red-blue issue, but it's definitely an urban-rural issue.
Okay, thank you there, Gary. Now, how about we go with Helen, and then we'll finish up with Bill on this question.
I liked the film. I very much, and I was at John Day this spring, went and visited there, and I found the community to be fascinating for two reasons. First, there's no one there. 7,000 people in a whole giant county is very small. And they have the Painted Hills. It's a beautiful spot. And it would be very easy for people to ruin the hills. They're mud. And so if someone came through with a truck or, you know, wanted to do graffiti, you could do it. And there's no one watching, really. I mean, but no one's destroyed it. No one's there has harmed it. And it's the same thing with there's a Chinese and historic Chinese pharmacy there that stood at a city park for over 30 years. And the children didn't go in and ruin it. They didn't write graffiti. This place just stood there, and now it's a national monument. I mean, a state monument. It's just amazing. Um, and so I just feel like they have so much that they could teach Western Oregon, Portland, who are dealing with graffiti everywhere, and homeless folks, and there's so much they could teach us if we would listen. The Eastern folks have something good going on, and I would like to know more about that. And
yeah, thank you very much. You know, my whole life I lived in an urban and a rural, and then now I live in a rural type of community, and I give kudos to that. But sometimes I just miss being in the city. So there's pluses on both sides. How about Bill? How about Bill? Go for it, Bill.
I want to focus a little bit less on Eastern Oregon versus Western Oregon and focus a little bit more on the documentary itself. Whenever I watch a documentary, I always pinch myself and remind myself that the documentary maker is God. He's playing God. He's deciding who to shoot, when to shoot, how to shoot them. So I look at that, and the people that he picked for this documentary were all nice people. They were people that you'd, quote, like to have a beer with. There was very little emotion, anger, hatred, bitterness. There was a lot of fact. This is how we feel about the wolves, and this is the way why we feel about that way about the wolves. So it was very factual. And even though these are not my kind of people, they are the kind of people I'd like to sit down and have a beer with. I was especially reminded of that fact at the end when they did something about Amon Bundy and his way of behavior, where he basically cordoned off a whole section and he said, we're against the federal government. And I said to myself, boy, am I glad the people that we just finished looking at are not the same as Amon Bundy.
Oh, wow. That's, man, a great observation, and I had totally forgot about that guy. So, yeah, I like the part about the beer, though. That would intrigue me as well. So, I said Bill would be the last, but I'll go with you, Lynn. And Lynn, you are the last on this question.
All right. Well, Bill really said what I was thinking, how they seem like very reasonable people that they have speak, and I liked that. Of course, that might not be, they may be leaving out some people who aren't as attractive, so that could be. But I guess I feel there's a lack of that, of portraying rural people in a positive way, because we urban people tend to dominate the country, and educated people too dominate the country, and so things are often presented from quote our perspective with our prejudices, leaving myself out of our though. So I like the fact that it wasn't biased. I mean, it was very far from the comedy. What do you call that? The Daily Show. The Comedy Channel portrayal of rural people or working class people in that sort of show.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn. Now I'll go into the next question. Now, this next question is a bit long, so I might have to splice it in parts. So here we go. Can you explain the key issues or policies, such as gun laws, drug approaches, and environmental regulations that have led to the polarization between the two regions of Oregon? Okay, marinate on that. And what are the main reasons behind the Move Oregon's Border for a Greater Idaho movement proposal to break off most of Oregon area and join Idaho. Basically, the movement to join, and then also the key issues and policies. You know, I mean, that was long-winded, but I think it's in the chat as well. So what about first about the policies? The policies, the gun laws, the drug approaches. Oh, we got a winner. How about you, Sue? Yes.
Yeah, I think you've named the policies, and what struck me in the documentary was that it was the statewide citizen initiative petitions that seemed to be the pain points. And so what struck me was that when you have majority rules, you have everybody voting in their districts and whatever, so that you're making a regulation statewide, however well-intentioned, however well-funded or not. It's majority rules, and definitely in Oregon we have more urban people. So yeah, I think that the hot policy issues tend to create these citizen initiatives, and then what happens with our democracy, what happens with our compromise, our legislative process. So that's, and I know that's not a popular point of view, but I was struck with that. So
yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on, especially the gun? Do you know why it was one part of the country was in, you know, it's like, oh, you know, because I can see it in the urban area, but then when you're out there and the closest neighbor is 50 miles, it seemed like it was obvious why they were more about the gun, so they can have a gun so they can protect themselves. So what do you think about that, Sue?
well, I don't want to speak for Eastern Oregon, but certainly, I've lived rural and I've lived urban, and the fear is completely different. The fear of the guns, the fear of having your guns controlled, the fear of not being able to protect yourself is completely different on both sides. And the measure that was put forward seems like it was very strongly urban perspective. The one that passed in Oregon, the one 110 that they, or no, sorry, 114. I can't keep track of the numbers.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Me either.
Anyway, I'll let somebody else talk.
Okay, how about you, Bill? Go for it.
Yeah, this is an eternal problem. It's always been with us throughout history. Going back to 1776, when this country was founded, there was a big argument about how much power the federal government should have and how much the state should have. And one of the ideas was, let's just push things out to the states because they know themselves better than we do. Let's let them rule themselves. Okay, so now you get to Oregon. You know what? Oregon's not working because their gun requirements and drug requirements are different from in the other part of the state. So what do we need to do now? Well, there's two things we can do. We can have the state capital in Oregon have two sets of laws, one for the East and one for the West. Or we can say, you know what? State's too big. Let's push all these things out to the local level. Let's let every county make its rules and regulations as far as guns and drugs. So, you know, without getting into the nitty-gritty details, you know, how far down do you push things? And, you know, if you push them down to the county level or even the city level, or do you try to do it at the state level, but then at the state level, you got to set up a checkerboard and have different laws in each board, in each square of the checkerboard. So it's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then to keep both sides together as one state. Yeah, that would be, that is a tough one, you know. So I guess I don't see any other hands. I thought I saw one little shy hand. Oh, Bob. Oh, Bob, go ahead. I see your raised hand. I don't see it. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Bob.
Oh, okay, unmuted. Yeah, we actually just recently had a Braver Angels discussion. We don't call it a debate, a discussion on guns, how we can continue to protect the Second Amendment, but also looking at how we can maybe look at some gun restrictions. And it was very, very informative. We just held it at our public library in Boise. Had a good crowd there, but we had about between 40 and 50 people, and just listened to one another. But as I listened to, you know, the documentary on Eastern Idaho, you can certainly understand, you know, the concerns there. in Eastern Oregon. And it's just a microcosm of what we're facing in the United States. You know, when we look at red and blue states, red and blue areas, Oregon is like the United States. Actually, even Idaho, we've got our little blue pockets in the Boise area, and then a couple other areas in Idaho, and it's just this is a national concern. But it's so important that we continue this discussion. The answers aren't easy, but as in Braver Angels, as we listen to other points of view, it helps us to understand better and maybe come to some kind of conclusions that can benefit all. The perfect conclusions just aren't out there. They're just not. But by listening to one another, we can make some significant steps.
All right. It's always nice to hear that brave and angel way. Thank you. Thank you. Barbara, well, we got Bob and Gary again. So which one? We'll go with you first, Gary.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to mention part of our research in the state of Oregon as we're trying to prepare a way to sort of bring a Braver Angels approach to this difference is that we're realizing on the subject of your indicating policies there. What we really need to keep in mind is that by the nature of the rural reality of Oregonians, they vary different across different parts. You know, there are farmers, there is timber, there are fishery and water, there's extractive industries. And so you have to be careful not to say, well, this, you know, like John Day had this terrible crisis when their final mill shut down, and it was a forested area. So I think to be really respectful in the BA way toward the realities of the particular people who are struggling to be heard is to realize that it's actually quite specific in terms of the location. And some of them are commonplace. There are people who have fentanyl problems all over the state, you know, but then there are other areas in which, you know, extractive industries, water industries, and so on. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Now move on to Elizabeth, and then that'll be the final question on this question, and then Donna will be up next. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
And I almost want to give my time to Mike. I know him.
Oh, you do?
I know what kind of
you can.
Information he has there. Mike, because I've already spoken, I want to let Mike speak.
All right. Okay, he came up. Yeah, Mike, if you want to, where's Mike at? I don't see him anymore. There he is, down there in Idaho. Yeah, that might be, go for it, Mike. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I might not live up to the pomp and circumstance of trying to say something cool now. I'm worried about that. To me, what I hear or what I see a lot in this conversation is something that kind of a little bit of went on in chat is that there's the high density population group of people or the urban people have or enact rules that help them and make their society better in terms of what they need. And I have no doubt that that's true. They're trying to do the best that they can to improve their lives. But the problem is that just like, you know, why we fought, you know, the war in the first place against the king, you know, when you're in a distant land, i.e. on the other side of Oregon, and this one small population or this one high density population center is effectively ruling you, then you feel like, you know, taxation without representation. And I think I see that quite a bit in Idaho, especially with Blues, is they feel like, oh, well, I have no say. There's no point in voting. You know, there's no point in me doing this, that, or the other thing. And I just have to follow the rules. And I think that is very easily translated to the other side too, even talking about how the politics, and it might even hurt more, because I know the Republican Party, and this is in general, trying to make a generalization here, not trying to be too terribly specific, but in general, the Republican Party looks at politics as in, we want to get out of your way so you can make your life better, versus the Democratic Party looks in general of, we want to help you to make your life better. And I've seen that in many other Braver Angels conversations where that's been fairly true across the board. You're welcome to disagree if you want. But I see that as a population out in the rural areas saying, I don't need help. I don't need you governing me. I don't need you to be in my day-to-day life. And they probably feel like they're in a different country than the people of Portland. And they don't want to be ruled by a different country, just like the Americans didn't want to be ruled by Britain.
Thank you, Mike. That's pretty good. Help and get out of your way. This almost sounds like the same thing, but I like that. Okay. All right. Now we'll have Donna with the next question.
Thank you, Ron. So this one is specifically for you folks from Oregon and Idaho, although I appreciate that you've been speaking a lot already. But this is for you folks. If you're from Oregon, what do you think about part of your state breaking off and joining Idaho? And if you're from Idaho, what do you think about Oregon, part of Oregon, becoming part of your state? And Linda Paul, Idaho.
Hi, thank you. Yes, from Idaho. I am not happy with the idea of the Greater Idaho movement because I already feel, as Mike kind of indicated, I feel rather disenfranchised in my own state as it is, and I would not appreciate feeling more disenfranchised with the addition of a whole lot more people that I don't agree with. That said, the other thing about the whole idea of reforming a state so that you can get your own way, just as I think Jet earlier mentioned, this is not solving problems. This is fracturing our country and shifting political boundaries for convenience. We need to come together in the Braver Angels way and recognize the problems that rural people deal with, and as Michael said, the problems that urban people deal with. They're different problems for the most part, and we need solutions that will work for both segments of the population. So that's it.
Well, amen to that, Linda. I get the feeling that you may be from more of an urban part of Idaho. Is that true?
Yes, I'm from Boise.
Yeah,
I'm from one of the very small, rather blue parts of Boise, of Idaho.
Yeah, so probably you can understand how some of the folks in Eastern Oregon are feeling, because they're feeling disenfranchised. So thank you.
Yes,
for
I
chiming
do
in.
understand it. I do. I really do. But I just don't think that shifting borders is going to solve problems.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Steve Radcliffe, you're next.
I honestly don't feel that I know enough about this problem to say a whole lot until I get a chance to sit and talk with some of the people who are in this Greater Idaho movement. I'm hesitant to say too much. I will say, I think these people genuinely are disenfranchised. It's not just that they feel disenfranchised. And the concentration of population in the northwestern part of the state means that it's one person, one vote. So those ideas carry the day, and they've got all the political power. Not all, I'm exaggerating. Now, I'm not willing to change one person, one vote, but it occurs to me that with great power comes great responsibility. And I hope that the folks, liberals, and I'm a blue-leaning guy myself, could learn greater appreciation for the challenges of those of us who live in the countryside. I mean, I'm country boy. And make policies accordingly. I don't, like I say, I don't yet know any more really about that, but I in thinking about it, the phrase "with great power comes great responsibilities" keeps rolling around in my head.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Steve, I appreciate that you started out with saying that you don't know enough and you need to learn more. That's just a breath of fresh air. Thank you, Steve. Truth, how about you?
Yeah, gosh, I believe the richness of our decision making comes when we have people with different ideas. I value those who have a different idea than I do, and I think that that's an important part of coming up with something that works is when you have all the ideas brought in. And so personally, I think it would be a great loss for even the so-called blue part of the state to lose the rural part of the state, a great loss. Anyway, I just really think that the whole idea is if we could be more mixed up, we actually might be able to solve problems better than just being, especially at the national level, since we do need to stay together as a nation. If we were more mixed up, we would maybe be more listening to each other and learning from each other. Anyway, I just think the richness would be lost if we lost our other part of our state, and I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, thank you, Truth. I'm reminded of The Big Sort, the book that talked about how we tend to be sorting ourselves according to ideology. And, you know, part of it too being that populate the employment opportunities for people in rural areas has been declining with the decline of timber in the case of Oregon, or farming in some places, or ranching. So yes, that's wonderful. Okay, Samantha, you are up.
Thank you. I'm not going to belabor this. I want to just say that the things that Linda was saying and the things that Steve were saying really resonated with me, because what they're saying is there has to be a better understanding. And Steve touched on this with great power comes responsibility. One of the problems is that the problems of both rural life and urban life need to be addressed at the top by those that have power. Problem solving really needs to come from them, which means they need to be listening to what the real needs are of the diverse population that they are in essence ruling. And so with that power, I think what Steve was saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, is that they are the ones that need to start the problem, the solutions, the problem, the discussion, the pulling together what the problems are in their very diverse populations, and then coming up with ideas, rather than having people in the urban areas sending bills to the state government to be voted upon. And I think that's where we get the disparity in the voices being heard.
Okay, thank you, Samantha.
I hope I'm making sense.
You did indeed, yes. Okay, and now we have a dear friend, Michael, but I'm going to say your name wrong, Nathaler, and he is a very important rural voice for us. Even though he is in rural Washington and not in Oregon or Idaho, I'm sure he'll have something very interesting to say.
Well, thank you. Actually, I do speak Idahoan and Oregonian pretty well. I was born in Portland. I am an elected official here in rural Washington. And the first point I'll make is that we have people that are seriously looking at joining this greater Idaho movement. So it's not just Oregon and Idaho. Another point I will make as an elected official is I painfully see a divide here in Washington between rural and urban. I have been absolutely told by Washington legislatures, we do not care about your point of view. And I mean, those words were used. We do not. So, Jet talked about, and other people talked about, we need to hear each other. And I totally agree with that. That's why I belong to Braver Angels. This is why I promote Braver Angels. We need to hear. Another comment I heard was about education. I was on one of the first Braver Angels Red Blue workshops, and that issue came up, and I did a little bit of research. And actually, your urban people generally have a higher level of education. And I can tell you, if you want to try to run a farm someday, it's not for the faint or the unintelligent. Something else I want to bring up here. We talk something as if this were new. In 1962, I was in Mississippi with the United States 82nd Airborne as we stopped a very real civil war about to take place when we put James Merritt in the University of Mississippi. So I put this out to people. Sometimes we look at this as something new. But and another point I want to raise is an attitude. States' rights as opposed to federal rights. I believe gun issues and some of the other issues that we're dealing with have their roots in the concept that our nation was founded on states' rights, and large government is the antithesis of that, and with the rights and responsibility and great powers responsibility is an excellent point. So I just want to make those points, and I thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your voice, Michael. We really appreciate it. I'd kind of like to move on, but we have Mike and Elizabeth. There's something that you would really like to add kind of quickly, go ahead or put your hand down. Mike, how about you?
I'll just add something really quickly. I don't know how many of you are read in the works of John Locke, but John Locke actually addressed this quite directly. John Locke basically looked at our democracy, and he already predicted this problem. And he said that the majority is going to rule the minority, and the minority will suffer. Look at how many times in America that the minority has suffered when it comes to any group whatsoever. And that's why John Locke was a big proponent of the Electoral College, and why he wanted something like the Electoral College even in the state side. Being able to properly balance the voices of the minority versus the majority, I think, is something that's very important. And again, praise to Linda for saying it, and thank you. The whole point of Braver Angels is to bring us together. And we don't want to split off and section off into our own tribes of red and blue. We want to be able to work together. And in my time here at Braver Angels, I have found that if you sit down and talk to somebody of the opposite opinion of yourself, you'll find that there's amazingly a lot of common ground between you and that person. And when you get past the protesting and the yelling, it's actually very easy to come up with laws or rules that can benefit you both. So I believe that more, I guess the proper word is equitable, but equitable representation between low population or low density areas and high density areas is something that really needs to be looked into and researched in terms of how do we ensure that low density areas are properly represented.
Okay, well, thank you for that wonderful advertisement for Braver Angels. If you're not a member now, with that, with Mike's ringing endorsement, I sure hope you'll join. So Elizabeth, your last quick comments?
Yeah, this isn't really a majority minority issue because the majority of the Oregon state is rural, and that's being the big problem. We're also discussing this as Braver Angels. We all understand the Braver Angels way and the importance of communication and talking together. The problem is that we can't get the politicians and policymakers to listen. And so we can have this discussion among ourselves, but how do we get this out there to people who aren't among us to actually have that listening and that compassion to bring it together, and create the right policies. That is the problem that we're having here in Oregon when the rural representatives to Congress use the last voice they have and walk out and deny a majority so that decisions can't be made until they are heard. All anybody can focus on is criticizing them for doing that, and instead of listening to them for what it is they were trying to be heard to say. So that's the problem that we need to address here, is how to actually bring the Braver Angels way to somebody else.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to move on now. Ron, it's your turn again to ask a question.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. You gave us the direction to go into solutions. So, so this question is like, how might changes to the district voting or representation be explored to better address the distinct issues faced by Eastern and Western Oregon and promote a more equitable, responsive government for the entire state? So we have two hands up. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go with Sandra, then I'll come back to you, Lynn. Okay? All right. How about you, Sandra? Go for it.
Okay, thank you so much. Are you able to hear me? I'm on two different computers here.
Yeah, we heard both computers. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
I know. Just
Okay,
joking.
good.
Just joking.
All right. Well, I have been listening with great interest to what everybody's saying, and I agree that the Braver Angels are a wonderful group of people, both reds and blues. I love them all, because we are people of goodwill. We want to work together. We want to respect each other and learn from each other. And that's just a beautiful thing. And I wish everybody was like that and would want to join us and talk with each other that way. But I agree with what Elizabeth was just saying, that there are people who are not of goodwill. In my opinion, this is what I observed, and it bothers me a lot, that there are people who have power who do not want to listen. They have the power, they're content to use it, and they don't care, as that good man from Washington, Michael, said. But I've been thinking about solutions, and someone once suggested that we have one senator from each county. Instead of having right now, as most people maybe know, we have in the areas, we have 2 House districts, and then we have, from those 2 House districts, 1 senator who oversees the 2 House districts. So in other words, we have a lot of people in the urban area who have good representation in both the House and the Senate in Oregon. And my thought is, go ahead, do the House districting the way you want to, but have 1 senator then from every county, so that we would have a more equitable representation, at least at that level. That would never, ever pass through the legislature. They're not going to want to, give up their power, right? But possibly a constitutional amendment might work, where you go to the people and ask them what they think. We're working on that kind of thing with school choice right now too, because the legislature, being outnumbered by Democrats, have no interest in school choice. But so people have to go to the people and try to work solutions through the people. That's very costly, however. And there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation that goes on too. So that's a huge challenge, but I don't see any other way at this point. But I'm very eager to hear what other people have to say about possible.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Lynn, how about you? And then we'll go with Mike.
Well, Sandra kind of answered my question, but still, this is the way the federal government is set up, that you have in the Senate, it's equal representation for each state. And people in the populous states like mine sometimes complain about it and say that's not democratic because rural states get disproportionate representation. And I'm not sure I agree with that. So I was thinking, that's one of the mainstays, one of the checks and balances really of our country. You got the House where more populous areas get more power, and the Senate where, less populous areas get relatively more power and so, I was just wondering if that could be done, is being done on the state level. And Sandra answered that when it came to Oregon, but we've also heard from the state of Washington and Idaho tonight and other states. And I'm wondering if that could be. And also, of course, as someone else brought up, just more local power. I mean, why does everything have to be decided at the state level? Someone talked about how state power was an important check and balance, in our government, having states have power. Well, localities, counties could have power to make their own gun laws and laws concerning wolves, that meet their needs.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Mike?
Thank you. So actually, you stole the words right out of my mouth. That was the point of the Senate, right? That was the point of the Senate of the federal government. That should be the point of the Senate and the state government, is to be able to divide power between high population and low population areas. And I'm sorry for my comment earlier in the misunderstanding. I was regarding to low population areas as the minority in terms of minority of area instead of minority of people or demographic. But I also think that it's very important, something that we as Braver Angels need to do and probably should do a better job at. And that is teaching our methods and our ways into our government as best as we can. Just simply having, like Elizabeth said, having good people with good intentions, even though they disagree, that are able to just sit together and be able to make rules and make laws in a way that can benefit everybody instead of just screwing over the other party, I think is a way that we found in Braver Angels that is popular. It's not only popular, but it's very good. And it's great to have conversations and be able to come to middle ground. And I think that's how we should approach and make our laws. I'll tell you a quick story about what happened when I used to live in Southern Oregon, because I used to live there for about 4 or 5 years. We had a representative, I won't from Portland. I won't name who it was, but that particular representative came down to our area in Southern Oregon and said, and made a big presser about coming to our company and saying, we're going to work with these people to try to reduce the forest fires and smoke in Southern Oregon. And that particular representative came down and put a big presser out, made a big deal about it, had a big rally about it. And then when we all came back behind closed doors and sat down, you know what that person said to us? Well, you people are never going to vote for me anyway, so I'm really not going to do anything. And then just managed to take out their phone and sat there. And we just looked at that person and said, wow. And we just left that person alone in a meeting room in our company. Because it's true. We're never going to vote for them, mainly because of the attitude like that. Not only because of the politics that we don't agree with. And I think that we need to root out, to me, that evil out of our government.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I was just wondering, did Oregon implement ranked choice voting? And is that a viable? Oh, they didn't. Okay, all right. So I saw you shake your head, Gary. So it's like I'm answering. Okay, how about we go with Gary?
Okay.
And then we'll go to the next question. Yeah.
I think there actually is a movement to explore ranked choice voting in Oregon, but it's not here yet.
Okay.
I keep coming back to sort of first principles out of Braver Angels. And one theme that I'm hearing from a lot of folks here is a way forward is redefining self-interest more broadly. There's a wonderful story in Monica Guzman's book where she went to Sherman County in Oregon, her whole crew of blue folks from Seattle, if you guys remember that. And they were breaking for lunch, and there was a half-eaten sandwich on the table. And this wheat farmer who was sitting there just said, you know, if people only understood, if people in the cities only understood what it takes to grow the wheat to make that sandwich. I think there's if we realize how interdependent our interests are, you know, we in the cities really don't get our food from Trader Joe's. You know, the food comes from the ground. And I think, you know, how do we sort of project an educational process so that people can really, truly appreciate how much the people on the other side, whether you're rural or urban, either way, really do need the other side. And then you start to redefine your own self-interest around holding that as a value for yourself, even though that's not specifically something that's politically or economically important to you. I think that's a deep Braver Angels value. I see that, for example, in Braver Politics, you know, where you get the political people to say, I want people on both sides of the aisle to respect me because I'm going to have respectful dialogue about policy. And if you have that kind of, like that person that was just referred to who came to the South, you know, Mike, you're talking about, and said, why do I care? You're never going to vote for me, you know? Well, that would be, he would be in a really different position if he actually thought that he is actually a neighbor to all of these people in the South. And he could gain their confidence if he thought about what their needs were.
All right, thank you very much. It sounds like you're saying we should put a Braver Angels on every corner in Oregon. So that would be super. Yeah, I'm because of time, you can keep your hand up there, Barb and Gary, and Sandra, but I'm gonna move on to Molly. How about that? Thank you, guys. We can't hear you, Molly. Still can't.
Yeah, even when you're unmuted, we can't hear you, Molly.
Probably in your phone. I'll give you 5 seconds and then I'll read the question myself. I'll read the question. Okay. What were solutions unexplored in the film? What solutions were unexplored in the film? And I tell you what, Barb, why don't you go ahead and tag team on that question, but from the last question.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to say is a very slight corrective at the city of Portland level for our city commissioners. We've just instituted ranked choice voting, and it's being put into effect for the next election cycle. So just mention that. The other maybe kind of also addresses you know, solutions that were mentioned. This may be hopelessly naive, but I know I was always an advocate when I three kids were in public schools in Portland, that we keep funding outdoor schools so they could have exposure to, you know, the great forests of the Northwest. But I also was an advocate for a week on a farm for young people, a working farm where they could be exposed to that. And I sometimes think, you know, if we're forming the next generation of you know, citizens, having exposure to the forest, having exposure to farming, the cultural exchange idea has always been, we'll send them to another country, you know, but what about sending them to other parts of your own state or the United States, which is culturally very different? So again, that's kind of a long-term view, but it's one way to form the next generation that might be more accepting of diversity.
Okay, thank you. Molly, are you able to get sound yet? Nope, doesn't look like it. I'm greedy. I'll continue. Ivan, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I was going to save this for my portion when I brought up my question later on, but it's pertinent to the one at hand. I was telling the other moderators yesterday that in Hawaii, we have a long tradition of having legislation at the state level that's differentiated among the counties. And since Oahu has Honolulu and it's the biggest city in the state, they say that some provisions in the law that have statewide application only apply to counties above a certain level in population. I don't know how many states follow that model, but it seems like that's something that could be followed in Oregon. We also have the city government. All the elections for city offices are nonpartisan. So that kind of opens things up. No longer are people running under labels. They're just running under their particular individual histories and track records and policies. That helps to open things up too. And finally, I mean, we already mentioned it before, but ranked choice voting, if you open up offices to a wider primary, an open primary, and have ranked choice voting in place, a lot of times people that would not normally get elected because of the limitations of going through a primary, they can get considered. And that's a very realistic option for many people. And that's all I had to say.
All right. How about, thank you, Ivan. How about you, Lori? Hi, Lori.
Hi, thank you. There's been lots of great discussion here. I live in Utah, where there's a lot of similar issues, except on the opposite side. So there is a lot that does happen in the rural areas, and they do have a lot of representation, to the point that sometimes other people, you know, they're in the ones in power. So I find it interesting to hear all this. And your ideas are great. I just want to point out, which I'm sure most people understand though already, but it's not really a viable option for them to start their own state, and not likely to happen there or anywhere else in the country. They didn't really address that in the documentary, and I just wondered what some thoughts might be on that. You know, in order for them to do that, all the adjoining states would have to agree to it, and it's very unlikely that that would ever happen. So I don't remember that being brought up in the documentary at all, although I do think it's a great exercise to still discuss it and to recognize that huge divide that's happening. But the viability is not very great, I don't think.
Say that again quickly. You know, what you said wasn't addressed in the documentary.
The fact, the viability of it actually happening, because in order for it to happen, all the adjoining states would have to agree, and the likelihood of that is not very high.
Well, they touched on it a little bit. They basically were saying it would be a mess, you know, but they did touch on it very lightly.
Right.
You know, so anyway, we have two more. We'll go with Wendy. Thank you, Lori. We'll go with Wendy, and then we'll go with Steve, and then we'll transition to Donna. Yeah.
Yeah, just to Lori's comment, I think it was the host at the very end said, you know, you need the legislature, the governor of each state, and then Congress, and said basically it's not going to happen. So I think it was at the very end when they mentioned that. But one of the things that struck me was that the people in Eastern Oregon wanted to be listened to. They mentioned that the governor's never been there and they don't come out and talk to them. But they also didn't talk about the efforts that they took. let alone to go and understand, why certain policies or, people in Western Oregon would support such policies. But they also didn't talk about, being an advocate, going to listening sessions for their legislators, or going to to the Capitol and, organizing a lobby day for their part of the state, or, all sorts of things that they could do to make people listen to them. It seemed as if they weren't as proactive, and they were expecting others to come to them.
Thank you, Wendy. And Steve will be the final, and then we'll go to Donna. Go ahead, Steve.
One of the things I was disappointed in the documentary was that the narrator was voting. And by that, I mean, I thought he was out ahead of his skis to say this will never work. The people in the Greater, I do not for a moment question the sincerity of the Greater Idaho people, even though I've never met one yet. So they're swinging for the bleachers with this idea. Now, I played a lot of baseball when I was a kid, and I can tell you, you win more games with line drives than you do with home runs. So if you can somehow hit Texas leaguers, if anybody else knows what a Texas leaguer is, those will get you where you want to go. So, yeah, when I first heard of Greater Idaho, I was very impressed with, wow, these people are really frustrated, and they've been frustrated for a long time to decide to do something that dramatic. And also one other point before I abandon the podium here. There's something very profoundly important about the human need to be heard and understood. And the folks in Eastern Oregon, nobody's hearing them. And if no one hears you, it's almost like you cease to exist in a certain way. It's like I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and if any of you know anything about the Amish people, their most severe punishment is shunning, where everyone in the community totally ignores the person who is being shunned, and it is very, very harmful. So when people are not being heard, I think this is like a teeny tiny version of shunning, and we need to stop doing that. We need to listen.
All right. Thank you, Steve. For a minute there, I thought you was going to say Pete Rose, but that's okay. All right, Donna, with the next question.
Oh, I'm actually able to talk now. So I can take this one.
Okay, go for it then, Molly.
All right. I did want to speak briefly to the solutions question, just to bring up something about the Bundys earlier, and then I'll put the next question, which builds on the idea of a listening tour, actually. So just to speak briefly to why solutions are so badly needed, an extreme case was definitely the Clive Bundy and family takeover of their own ranch, you could say, by themselves and the militias in Nevada. And I don't know if anybody's heard of the book Up in Arms, but I had no idea what had happened in Nevada or Oregon with his son Amos Bundy. I think it was Amos. And that book was really educational. So I'm going to drop something in the chat about the family that basically, said, you're not listening to us, so we're going to not pay taxes and defend our ranch land. And I will say that even though the Bundys, Clive Bundy is definitely not the hero of the book, and I know what happened in Oregon was really awful. I mean, with someone dying ultimately, I will say that it's very compelling in the book to hear that they were 2 out of 80 ranchers families left doing a traditional ranching life, and I think that speaks to some of the similar feelings in this film about people in Eastern Oregon. The idea that your way of life is on the decline, that your needs aren't being met. And obviously, violence wasn't the answer, but in their case, a standoff that, in Nevada at least did not lead to violence, but could have been very dangerous, was the only answer they saw. So I think that in some sense, we're like, these solutions we're talking about, become even more important in my mind when I think about what happens at the extremes. So I'll drop a note about that book in the chat. up in arms and want to speak to a specific solution that was proposed, but then really didn't have, how do I say it? Didn't have support, at least from, one of the main people featured in the documentary, which is a listening tour. So I just want to ask anyone who, oh shoot, 1 second. Sorry about that. I want to ask anyone who is familiar with the idea of a listening tour and has opinions on this. Why do you think one resident said a listening tour would have no effect? And we'll probably just take a couple on this. I will probably keep us to about 5 minutes per question for the remaining questions we have time for. We won't have time for all the questions, but that'll get us to most of them at least. So yeah, that's what I'm going to drop in the chat right now. What do people think? And I mean, 1 or 2 answers is fine. I don't think we need, several for this question either, just because it's more of an explanation. Yeah, go for it, Mike.
Elizabeth had her hand up first, if you would like to go to her.
Oh, okay. I didn't see her hand. Oh, it's because it's faded into the back, into the wall there. Elizabeth, go for it. And then Mike, you'll be our second.
I think a listening tour would be ineffective because we don't trust that the politicians would actually listen. There is a total lack of trust.
Yeah. I hear that. All right, thank you. And remind us where you are, Elizabeth. That would be helpful.
I'm in Portland.
Oh, you're in Portland. Okay, good to know. And I appreciate that you're bringing that message to us from Portland, especially. I think that makes it even more compelling. All right, and then Mike, take us away.
So, as I mentioned in the short story before, that was when I lived in Southern Oregon, and that was a big representative that came down and tried to, pretend that they were coming down to talk to us about how to reduce the smoke in Southern Oregon, because at least when I lived there, smoke is a huge problem. I mean, smoke during the summer in Southern Oregon is like smoking 1 or 2 packs of cigarettes a day for nearly the entire summer, and it's incredibly unhealthy.
Wow.
And there are solutions. There are very clear, obvious solutions that my company at the time would be able to help with. And the fact that that representative came down and as soon as he got behind closed doors said, you guys want to vote for me? I don't care what you have to say. That was very, it shines the light on the truth of how some of these politicians really act. And it's unfair for humans to treat other humans like that, regardless of your political stance.
What was the line you said again that was stated?
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You said a politician had said a certain line. What was the line you were saying about how they were, treating other humans?
The line is you people will never, you people specifically, you people will never vote for me. So there's nothing to talk about here. I don't care.
Yeah, no, it's really bad to hear that. Also, that level of trust, that level of distrust, or mistrust that Elizabeth was speaking to is really evident in that, and it can easily go both ways. Well, thank you too for speaking to that. If there are no other takers for this question, I just wanted to make sure to cover that because that was seen as a solution that was dismissed. Oh, yes, go for it, Truth. We haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I'm not quite as negative on people and trying to read what their motives are. I mean, clearly, unless they stated, but because I think a listening tour might have some effect, but I think probably a bigger impact will be something to where our system of government will give people the incentives to listen. And so we were talking about, representation being maybe somewhat county by county or that sort of thing. That might make a bigger difference because everybody's got the right incentives to listen.
And I also think people will get to know each other too. I mean, one issue that there was a little bit of debate about that Ron raised earlier and a little bit about in the chat was the issue of the educational divide. And some other people mentioned this too. And someone rightfully jumped in and said, I don't think it's right to assume that people in rural areas have less education. I think the one clear function, whether intentional or not, that a listening tour would serve is to make people realize, oh, folks can be highly educated if they're self-educated. They can be educated, through their parents, through their communities, through their, even through their religious communities. You can be educated around activism, perhaps. So I just want to make that point that like a listening tour will bring people together and they'll learn about each other at the very least and not judge each other as much or make assumptions as easily. Well, thank you for that, Truth. I'm going to move on to Donna, who is going to bring us to another question, which is also covering another form of solution, continuing with the same theme.
Thank you, Molly. So the question is, how can a more inclusive dialogue be initiated between Eastern and Western Oregon to bridge the cultural and ideological gaps and promote cooperation for the betterment of the entire state? And going along with that, what role could Braver Angels play in bridging the urban-rural divide in Oregon or elsewhere? Len, go for it.
Well, we in the DC area started developing a rural urban workshop. We did a pilot last December, so that's almost a year ago, in West Virginia, and we've been trying to get another one organized in West Virginia ever since, and hopefully we'll have one in March, which will be a full day one, no, they were both full day, but longer one in any case. And it's modeled after the Red Blue workshop, but adapted from that workshop. So I put some information about contact information in the chat, and I guess I could just put it again so you could contact me if you want to know more about it. Oh my goodness, I will. I can't do it while I'm talking. So that's about it, what I wanted to say.
Now, thank you, Len. And let's make sure that you get together with Barb and Gary because they sounded interested.
Yes.
So
Yes.
after tomorrow morning, I can also put you all together. And I want to put in a plug for the one-to-one rural urban conversation that Braver Angels does. It's 2 one-hour conversations between somebody who is urban or suburban and someone who is rural or small town. And specifically, I'm looking for some people to pilot a version of this conversation that uses photography. We have a partnership now, Interfaith Photo Voice, to use photography to help better explain what your area looks like, what you love about it, what issues you have with it. So if you're interested in participating in a pilot for this type of one-to-one rural urban conversation, please in the chat put down yes, and then put down whether you are urban rural, urban suburban, or whether you are rural or small town. Just put down yes, and I'll be able to tell who that is. So thank you. Okay, Jet, you're next.
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer to what Braver Angel could do to solve this issue in Idaho. However, I feel that what is happening in Idaho is a microcosm of what could happen in the United States of America. And I would like to suggest that Braver Angel should be intimately involved in the Idaho issue to see if we could solve the issues that Idaho is having. Because if Idaho splits, I see that is the beginning of splitting up the whole United States of America. So I'm following this very carefully, and I would like to suggest that Braver Angel should be intimately involved with Idaho so that they could resolve the problem by working together rather than splitting. If that happens, I see that could be harbinger of what could happen to the United States of America. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jet. Well said. Good point. Barb and Gary.
There we go. Thank you. I wanted to just suggest, and we need to connect with Len here because there's a whole lot of wisdom that's already been developed. But I think with a question about how can Braver Angels help, one of the things that our team has been really exploring is, what is it that draws someone who isn't in Braver Angels to a Braver Angels workshop? There's something that's promised them at least an opportunity to provide some nourishment. So if it's a red-blue workshop, people would like to be able to talk with their neighbors. If there's anyway, you know my point. And I think what we came up with was that there are really two pieces, at least in the Oregon urban-rural divide, that are issues. One is it's not our job as Braver Angels to control what policy issues need to be addressed. That really needs to be ginned up by the local communities wherever we do the workshop. And we would have a different one for a timber area from, an extractive area to a farming area and so on. But let them develop the policy areas of concern where they feel like they're not getting what they need. But then there's a second different category, and that is this being listened to. So we need to give them an opportunity to define the policies where they feel like they're not being satisfied by the state governments or even the local or federal governments for that matter. Let them define that and then construct a way to end the workshop, perhaps, with people volunteering, should they so desire. Everything's voluntary in Braver Angels, to have a working group where you get collaborative between the urban and rural folks who participated at the workshop around crafting the policy challenges, and then also collaborative around creating approaches toward local politicians so that people can feel like they've got an access to Salem, to the state government, through those local folks. So that's a very Braver Angels way to do it, but we're not controlling policy and we're not telling them what to think, but we're recognizing that those are the places where they're suffering. And that's what's going to draw them to the workshops.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful ideas all. And again, being heard. I'm going to really remember that example by Steve talking about Pennsylvania being shunned and how that feels if you don't feel like and that's a punishment to not be heard. So thank you. Elizabeth. Can you unmute, please?
There you go. Sorry. Len, you don't remember, but you met Steve Radcliffe and I at the National Convention, and we were in the breakout and learned about your workshop that you've done. And I know that Steve has been in touch with you so that we as a working group, and Gary, you're in the group, as you know, with us, we do have access to your work and what you've done, and we plan on building on that for sure. The biggest part is the getting the people in power to actually listen. And so we are gleaning from this any ideas that people have to actually get the power players to listen.
Okay, thank you. Michael, you're next.
Yeah, I'd like to get in a plug for the one-on-ones. I've done several of them, and it really works. When people hear my experiences, every time it's happened, I think they'll say, I didn't understand that. So again, I'll put a real plug in on those one-on-ones. I hope I'm still on the list. Thank you for this.
You're willing to do another one? I'll pair you up again. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I'm available.
Okay, and Lori, you're the last one.
I just going back to the original question, or what's something that Braver Angels can do. I think we're looking at this and talking about this Eastern and Western Oregon, but there's also those discrepancies within the groups in Eastern Oregon too, and maybe bringing those people together first to try and unite them in a way that they can come and get people in government to listen. If there's those own disputes going on among them as well, there's just less power and less voice happening. But if like Braver Angels came in and did something within that community itself, so that they could become united and move forward together, there might be more power in that and what they have to say to the government.
Excellent point, Lori. Thank you very much. Okay, over to Ivan now.
Thanks, Donna. We're coming on to the last of this discussion period. I want to pose a question that kind of goes into what happens if you get your wish. I mean, I know that the film talked about a lot of the participants, people interviewed, recognize that this is not going to happen. But if we engaged in the thought experiment, and if Eastern Oregon actually did join Idaho, what difference would it make to Idaho and Oregon, considering the social, the economic, and the political aspects? What do you think? Could they live with that solution? Especially want to hear from people from Oregon and Idaho. Steve, you're up first.
Thank you. If the greater Idaho thing actually happened, I guess I have some fears. I am concerned that it might exacerbate polarization. And that it might not work. As people from Idaho have said, the demographics in Idaho change just like the demographics everywhere else in the country change. And I hope there's a better solution.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to point out that the latest study about migration shows that Idaho leads the nation in the rate of in-migration. So if you have a whole influx of people going to Idaho, guess what happens to the housing prices? You know, it's something to keep watch of. Barb and Gary, I want to jump in on this one.
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, I think I'm with Steve on that. It's a really scary prospect to me. I'm not sure how carefully folks in the eastern part of the state have really thought through the impact on their livelihoods. For example, the western part of the state is much more heavily taxed, and there's a flow of government money from the west to the east. If the focus among the eastern folks is, I'm hurting, let me go somewhere else, and they find that they're now going to need Boise to take care of some of the social services that they had come to take for granted, but weren't focusing on because they're focusing on their frustrations. So there's just a whole array of policy realities that may or may not have been carefully thought through. And so if the division actually happens, the reorganization actually happens, it's going to be kind of chaotic. That's my worry.
Right. Mike, how about you next?
Thank you. So I think two things will happen in terms of what it will be. I think that the lower density population in or folks or counties will actually probably be very happy in terms of joining a state that represents more of their values. We have plenty of low population areas in Idaho, a lot, and I believe that the low population areas are fairly well represented here. And for the most part, of course, there's always differences, at least in the communities that I have joined and been in and listened to. They're very happy with the policies that we in Idaho create. But then conversely, there's another effect, and that effect is the effect on the nation. The effect on the nation is going to be, I would say, arguably worse than the positive that would occur to the people in which it would affect Eastern Oregon. And that is the nation would then come together and realize, hey, we can create tribes. We can redraw our state lines to create tribes of reds and blues. And the Reds can effectively create their own country, and the Blues can create their own country, and we can live apart. And I don't think that is the American way in terms of why this country was created. I think a lot of the solutions today that were set are very good, and I think the primary goal of our political system as a whole should be to learn to listen to each other, come together, and be able to placate or help groups that aren't as well represented that need to be heard. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. Eva, let's close out with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a blue-ish resident of Western Oregon who's in favor of Greater Idaho. I think it would increase polarization in the short term, but once they got into the experiment a little, okay, so you'd have the liberal Western Oregon, okay, just doing every crazy thing that ever popped into their head without the East to hold them back. And on the other side, you'd have the East like, gosh, I can finally do everything I've ever wanted to do without, Eugene and Portland, holding me down. And then, you'd be able to find out for yourself on your own terms if your favorite idea worked or not. You wouldn't be able to blame the other side for holding you back anymore. So, more polarization in the beginning, but then, once people actually got to just do their favorite idea without anybody holding them back, less blame.
Well, that's all. These are all very interesting comments. I appreciate all of them. It's a lot to think about. And I'll turn it over to Donna to finish.
Thank you, Ivan. At this point, actually, I'm going to hand it back over to Ron. He's going to talk about our next selection for the film club. And so away we go over to Ron.
Wait, one moment there.
So Donna, the next selection of oh, okay then. I almost had a memory. I almost forgot. Yeah. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. It was a great conversation. I thought. I'll leave some of this with you, and it's a quote from James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Think about that. Wise man. With that, the next film that we're going to talk about is, I want you to imagine a place where trust is the cornerstone of our relationship, institutions, organization, no polarization whatsoever. Braver Angel now is a memory. Hopefully not. And Trustworthy, which is a captivating documentary that takes you on a journey where it explores personal stories, expert insights, real life examples to explore the profound impact of trust. It shines a light on the consequences when trust fades away. Think about that. We live in a world where it just fades away. It underscores the vital role of transparency, open communication. How about that? And ethical choices. Now, you might be wondering, how can we contribute to rebuilding trust? Well, Braver Angels, this is where Brave Angels comes in. Remember, as a member, you join the community to foster trust. You build those relationships. You cannot have trust unless you have a relationship established. We've been saying this all day, all night, about the impact of Braver Angels. And what I mean is, it's like a cultural change where you use LAPP in your conversation. And for those of you members that know what that is, listen, acknowledge, pivot, and then give your positive perspective. And you have ownership of it. And we all now have a little trust. So for those who are new to this journey, go to braveangels.org and sign up. There's only $1 a month. And those who are not, go again and double it. No, I'm just kidding. But this has been a great adventure tonight. And I thank you for being here, because this is a great conversation. And hopefully you have some things that you can think about. All right. Who's next on this story here? Yeah. And my nickname is Sugar Bear, and I am PMA, Positive Mental Attitude. So,
Ron, you want to share the next film, man? Or you want me to share it?
The next film is Trustworthy.
Trustworthy, and it's going to be a great film. It's really interesting treatment.
Yeah, Molly.
Of...
Yeah,
Molly.
Ron just spoke about it.
I didn't hear it come. I apologize.
Yeah, we're
That's
good.
okay. That's okay. I get like that too when I'm when I get to be 25. You know, I get that way
20.
too.
Or 39, whichever. I wanted to just
39.
flag something. I put this in the chat. Actually, Ron, I was multitasking on the moderating. That's my excuse. But I'm glad you shared a great bit about it. I wanted to just mention that if anybody is, as always, if anybody is going to show this film and wants to see the link to our full list of questions for it, there are about a dozen, little over that of the questions, and we always have such rich discussions. We can't get to all of them, but we know that other people might want to show the film and are having similar discussions, whether in your local alliances or perhaps, in your own activist groups across Oregon, Idaho, or frankly, any state with a rural-urban divide. So I went ahead and I put, while Ron was chatting, I did put my email in the chat. I'm happy to share the Google Doc with you. And that is actually always the case, that we're always more than happy to share to share our documents with you. I mean, obviously you can come up with your own questions easily enough, but if you want to enrich your own discussions, let us know and we can share that.
Okay, so thanks everybody for coming to our discussion tonight, and we hope to see you at a future discussion. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Will you be sending that movie Trustworthy, or how do you get to see that?
We will share access with it, as always, where you actually sign up for the event. Okay. We definitely include a link to it or how to watch it. Okay. It's a special release format this time. We'll definitely let you know how to get to it. And when you sign up, it won't say at the very end, but like in the process of signing up, it'll share it in introducing the event itself. If you have any trouble, as always, you can write us too. But yeah, you can't get to it yet because we haven't put up the event yet.
Okay.
So we do share this. If you go to read your newsletter, Braver Angels newsletter, you'll see the information. Also, I just put in the link our webpage for the film club, and when we have the information, we'll always put it up there too. Thank you.